Hello, and welcome to FilmSlam Stream's post-film conversation for Golden Boy. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm a professor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We are very pleased to be joined by the director of Golden Boy, Kitty Hu. Kitty Hu is a Chinese diaspora documentary filmmaker who's an impact producer and a visual journalist with roots in the Bay Area of California. She grew up the daughter of immigrants, and she applies her documentary tactics to amplify stories at the intersection of justice and human relationships, looking at topics such as labor, housing, migration, and sustainability. As a member of the Asian American Journalists Association, she has received generous grants to amplify the stories about community resistance in the Los Angeles Chinatown area. Kitty has completed her BA degree in film and international development studies at UCLA, but she's joining us now from New York City. Hello, Kitty, and welcome.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for having me and a lovely bio intro you read there.
Well, it's great to have you here. So, people have, you know, footage on their phone, pictures of family members, and you're no different, but you just shot a little bit more. Well, what led you to want to tell this story, such a personal story?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I was working on my senior thesis for UCLA's documentary program at the time. And this incident with my mom had happened a few months prior to my last year of school. And so it was very much something that just took over my whole mental space, my whole life in general. And so I decided to almost use this film as a way to personally process because it was something that was just so personal to me and I just really needed that time and it was the only thing I could really think about. And so that's what kind of started me on the path of thinking about telling the story. How do I even tell it? What do I focus on? And a lot of my life, I've always thought deeply about my relationship with my dad because it's definitely been an up and down relationship. And so that's ultimately a little bit of what I focused on amidst everything else that was happening in the family.
So this film was like a good way to help you, like you said, deal with what's going on within your family. Did the idea come before your mother's illness or during it? When did it actually come about that you were going to make this film?
It definitely came after. I had already thought about ways, maybe way in the future, to explore a film about my dad and I. But my mom's incident was a very sudden incident. And so basically, it was a brain aneurysm that had ruptured. And so it just happened instantly. Like there was no warning that that would have happened. Like she was having a cold, having a headache, and then out of nowhere that happened. And so the idea to actually bring that into a film potentially definitely came after that.
And how long ago did that happen?
That happened in March of 2019. Yeah.
Okay, that's a couple of years ago. Okay, and tell us how is your mom doing now?
She's okay. She is still very much on a long path of recovery, and we're still looking for specialized doctors in some areas to help her with things. But she's taking it day by day.
And what about your dad? How is he doing caring for her?
I think he's also taking it day by day. And I would say that he's tired. He's never gotten a break within the last 2 years. But he's still very much like an optimistic person in that he really just wants to care for her. And I think this has fundamentally reshaped how he thinks about his life and his future. So I really admire that for him. But definitely, I can see that he's tired.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in making this film, you traveled to China to interview relatives. Did you do that before the aneurysm, or during, or after?
It was after. So it was a few months already into the filmmaking process.
Okay. Well, interesting. So let's talk more specifically about the film. just your approach, did the approach that you wanted to have wanted to be very personal? I noticed you chose not to have, you know, people speak that much. They spoke a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your approach in telling the story.
Yeah, one thing that was really important to me, and I think important to me in filmmaking in general, is making sure that whoever I'm filming with knows that at any time they can back out of this project. And so, one reason that's the main reason why I also didn't want to film my mom's face, out of respect for her and because she still very much was going through a lot. Um, and always kind of kept my dad knowing that as well. So, I'm just very grateful that he was open to it. Um, I think for me, it was a little bit of a blur, like a lot of things in terms of the actual verite filming. I had gone back home. I was still in school at that time. And so I was going back home about twice a month. And I was going to school in LA and I grew up in the Bay Area. So it was around like a 5 to 6 hour drive to go home. And I would just go for the weekend, usually to just check in on my family and then also to film a little bit. But there were definitely some days where I just really didn't want to film, like it was hard to pick up a camera. So the verite moments I almost had to force myself to really film that. And then in thinking about ways to stitch together the story and to give that a little bit of a backdrop of what my family's dynamics were prior to the incident happening, I had to dig through a lot of archives and I wanted to kind of bring a little bit more depth to the relationships just portrayed in the film. Because as I mentioned, I had a very much up and down relationship with my dad. And it's not something that you could immediately catch on camera because he was obviously doing the best he could. He was very much caregiving full time. And so I didn't want to use those moments to give that background. So that's why I dug into more of the archival footage and then also the family interviews to paint a more holistic picture of who my dad was before the incident had happened.
Right. And speaking of your dad, I know at one point in the film, he talks about separating, your private life from your public life. He wasn't just being camera shy. He, I guess, kind of meant it. So, how has he received the film? Does he like the film? Is he upset with you? Tell us a little bit about that.
He likes the film, I think. And he was laughing at first when he watched it because no one really ever sees their face up close on a screen for that long. And for him to see 20 minutes of it. So I think he enjoyed it and just thought it was a kind of quirky take on himself. And I had told him many times before, like, oh, sometimes you communicate in this way that's maybe not the most effective way to communicate, or you can come off as XYZ. And so watching the film kind of made him see himself in a different light. And I think with that particular moment that you mentioned, he actually, when he saw it, he laughed and he was like, "You put this in the film." So he wasn't mad about it, but he just thought it was interesting that it was included.
I see. So, how has this film helped your relationship with your father?
I think we already respected each other, of course, but I think that there was a different layer of respect there because I think he respected more of me and my journey and wants to become a filmmaker. And something that really meant a lot to me after the film was he watched it and he was like, I have no doubt that you will be fine in this world doing that. So that was something that was really meaningful. And it also helped me in those moments that sometimes were more tense, separate myself as a daughter and kind of like put on the filmmaker hat and be able to observe and to also see him in a different way and not have my own emotions so attached to what was happening.
Right. When he watched the film, were you with him when he watched it, or
Yeah, I
oh,
was standing
very
behind them both. Yeah, and I was really nervous,
uh,
but they were like having
and,
a chill time.
and another point in the film that I felt was so touching. You spoke about you couldn't cry because he didn't cry, but you did cry a lot doing this. I'm sure during the filming. So take us to some of those like I'm not trying to make you cry now, but some of those hard moments, like in which you just couldn't film or you had to film. Take us to one of those special moments during this process.
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me was even just thinking about the film. The actual filming for me, I feel like once I made myself film, I could do it. But in thinking about how to stitch the story together, having to watch the footage again and again, really, especially in the editing process, that was difficult. And at one point, I think you watch it so many times that obviously you're not going to cry every time. But if I had taken a few days off as a break and come back to it and watched a sequence that I was editing, I definitely would start crying and feel like very heavy emotions going through me, because it, in a weird way, is like you're reliving the painful moments, or especially thinking about how to write the voiceover as well and then recording the voiceover. That was definitely also a really difficult thing to do.
Mhm. And you called it Golden Boy. You could have called this anything. Why did you choose that Golden Boy as a title?
Yeah, it's because on my dad's side of the family in China, we have a huge family, but he's always been lauded as the golden child of the family. So that's where Golden Boy directly comes from. And it's always been interesting to me that the family sees him in such a positive light, because I grew up seeing him with so much anger and frustration and annoyance and all of that. And so it was always a dissonance for me to see my family view him as that. But I wanted to name it as that, seeing him now in another different light as a caregiver.
I see. And I can just add to that that he is golden for what he's doing. He's dedicating his life to, your mom. And also another play on that is California is known as the Golden State. So too, title to that. Before we wrap up here, can you tell us a little bit about the general response to this film outside of your dad and your family? How have people received this film?
I think people have generally said it's a very moving or personal story for them to watch. And a lot of people didn't necessarily know the extent of what was happening with my family or what I was going through. And this film was a way for me to almost personally tell people without having to literally tell them myself. So I'm grateful that a lot of friends watched it and kind of were able to understand a little bit more of what I was going through. I'm hoping to do a little more with the film, specifically around healthcare, or thinking about something else I could do with alongside the film about healthcare, because I don't touch upon as much the structural issues or with healthcare in the film. But that was something that also is very real and impacts people across this country. And so I want to hopefully use that film as a way to talk more about the healthcare system at large as well.
Is that your next project that you're working on? Is that what we can look to see from you soon?
It's something I'm definitely thinking about. I'm working on another project more so along the lines of talking about healing and trauma. But I'm been brewing a lot on what I can do with healthcare that's hasn't already been done and isn't talking necessarily directly at the faults of the system, but creative ways to kind of bring those issues to light.
And I'm just curious, how has this film or this experience with your family changed you as a person? I know, I mean, 2 years ago you were one way, and today you're a different way. If you don't mind sharing that with us.
Yeah, I think one way is just it again kind of recenters my family in my life and makes me think really deeply about those relationships, because there's some things that it happened so quickly that I just like I can't talk to my mom about certain things, I can't ask her questions about certain things. So I think it fundamentally has shaped the relationship, at least with me and my family. But I also think it impacts the day-to-day decisions of like, do I actually move away from home? Checking in with home, like really thinking about like healthcare in a different way as well.
Yeah, well, very good. Well, Kitty, this has been such an enjoyable conversation, and I really thank you for sharing with us this film. And not only that, sharing with us, a personal part of your life. That's very brave and very commendable of you to do such a thing. And I just wish you and your family, well and all the best.
Thank you so much, Eric. It means a lot to me that people are watching the film.
And I'd like to thank you, our audience, for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about the current 45th Cleveland International Film Festival and future film festivals, please continue to follow us on social media or visit clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.